Dad, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out. Lucas's voice sliced through the quiet Saturday morning like a blade of cold steel. It was 7:03 a.m., and the old clock in my kitchen had barely finished chiming when the call came. I almost dropped my coffee mug when I saw his name flash across the screen. My son had never been a morning caller, especially not with that tone tight, trembling, rehearsed. "What sounds so urgent this early, son?" I asked, settling back into my kitchen chair. Steam curled from my mug, the smell of roasted beans and cinnamon filling the air. The morning sun poured through the window, painting soft squares across the newspaper I hadn't read yet. "Well," Lucas began, stumbling over his words, "Brianna and I were talking, and we really think you should come to Mila's birthday party today. You know, maybe a little early. Around 1:30? I frowned slightly. "Early? Since when do I need convincing to see my granddaughter?" There was a pause, a rustle on the other end, and then Brianna's sharp whisper, low but distinct, "Just say it exactly like we talked about." Lucas cleared his throat. "It's just, there's some family stuff we'd like to go over before everyone arrives. Future plans and all that." Family stuff. Future plans. Words that never came easily to my son unless there was money tangled in them. I stared at Mila's latest crayon drawing pinned to my refrigerator. A crooked blue house with 4 stick figures labeled Grandpa, Daddy, Mommy, and me. My name written in purple, bigger than the rest. That little girl was the brightest spark left in my life since Lena died 3 years ago. "I'll be there," I said finally. "But Lucas, what kind of family stuff are we talking about?" "Oh, nothing heavy, Dad," he rushed to say. "It's about, making sure everyone's taken care of. Mom would have wanted that." The mention of Lena twisted something deep inside me. Making sure everyone's taken care of. I'd heard that phrase enough times in business meetings to know what it really meant. Someone wanted to get taken care of first. After the call ended, I stared at the phone for a long moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Lucas's nervous tone, Brianna's whisper, the sudden interest in my attendance. Something wasn't right. I tried to shake it off and focus on the day ahead. Mila's 8th birthday. Her laughter. The pink frosting she always ended up smearing across her nose. That was what mattered. Not whatever family plans Brianna was scheming about. Still, as I reached for my second cup of coffee, a quiet unease coiled inside me. 20 minutes later, I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, buttoning the pale blue shirt Lena used to say brought out my eyes. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Gray hair thinning, lines around the mouth deeper. Grief had carved its mark on me, but I still stood straight, steady. I thought of all the money I had funneled their way since Lena's funeral. First, the car that barely made it through winter. Then, the down payment for their house. Then, private school tuition for Mila. Every request packaged in guilt and urgency. Every debt disguised as a favor to keep the family together. I'd built bridges for a living, real ones, across rivers and valleys, and I'd always trusted in solid foundations. But lately, every time Lucas called, I felt cracks forming under my feet. When I walked out to the driveway, the morning light gleamed against the hood of my old Ford. My neighbor, Helen, was watering her begonias across the street. "Morning, Arthur," she called. "Heading somewhere special this early?" "Mila's birthday party," I said, locking the door behind me. Helen smiled, wiping her hands on her gardening gloves. "Oh, that sweet girl. I actually saw your son and his wife downtown earlier this week, Tuesday I think it was. They were leaving Badger State Bank. Looked serious, big folder in hand." Something in my stomach tightened. "Did they?" I asked lightly. Probably mortgage business or something. You know how young folks are with loans." "Right," I said, forcing a smile. "Probably just that." But the details stuck. Tuesday, the same week, bank papers. As I drove toward the mall to pick up Mila's presents, my mind replayed Helen's words again and again. At the toy store, I chose a Lego architecture set. Mila had been obsessed with buildings ever since our field trip to Milwaukee's Bridge Museum last month. Then, a pink and silver bicycle with safety reflectors. At the checkout, the young cashier smiled. "She's a lucky granddaughter." "She's my world," I replied. Back in the parking lot, loading the bike into the back of my truck, I caught my reflection in the window. Steady eyes, quiet determination. For years, I'd been the kind of man who believed family loyalty trumped suspicion. But experience had taught me that bridges collapse not from storms, but from hairline cracks you ignore for too long. By noon, the presents were wrapped, the roses for Brianna arranged, and the weight in my chest had settled into something colder. I remembered Lena's last words in the hospital. "Promise me you'll always take care of Mila. But watch Lucas carefully. He's kind, but easily led." Back then, I thought she meant his college friends, or his gambling habit from years ago. Now, I wasn't so sure. I tucked the birthday card into the gift bag and whispered to the empty kitchen, "I'll be there early, Lena, but I'll be watching." Outside, the sky over Madison shimmered in that bright, deceptive calm that comes right before a storm. And somewhere between the hum of the truck engine and the rustle of the gift bags, I had the uneasy sense that this birthday party wasn't really for Mila at all. It was for me. And I was walking straight into something far bigger than cake and candles. Lucas's house sat on the quiet edge of Lake Mendota, a two-story place he could never have afforded without my temporary help. As I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, the first thing I noticed was how different it looked from the last time I was there. Expensive white balloons arched across the porch. A rented catering van sat by the curb. Even the welcome sign looked custom-made, with "Happy 8th Birthday, Mila" painted in gold letters. The kind of celebration that screamed money and guilt. Before I could knock, the front door burst open. "Dad!" Lucas's voice carried too much enthusiasm, almost theatrical. "You made it!" He wrapped me in a hug that felt both forced and desperate. Behind him, Brianna appeared in a pastel dress, her smile tight and polished. "Arthur, how wonderful to see you," she sang. "You look so handsome today." "Thank you, Brianna," I said evenly. "Everything looks extravagant." Her hand lingered on my arm. "Oh, we wanted it to be special. Mila only turns 8 once, you know." "Indeed," I said, letting my eyes sweep over the room. Streamers glittered under warm lights. Guests filled the living room, neighbors, co-workers, even a few of Brianna's book club friends. The smell of catered food hung in the air, rich and artificial. Every corner looked staged, every smile rehearsed. Then I saw her. Mila, in a sky-blue dress, her hair tied with ribbons, running toward me like a burst of sunlight. She collided into my chest, small arms wrapping tight around my waist. "Grandpa!" she squealed. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to her level. "I have a surprise for you later." Her eyes sparkled for a moment, then dimmed almost instantly. A flicker of worry crossed her face before she forced a smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Brianna swooped in, hand resting gently on Mila's shoulder. "Say it louder, honey. Grandpa deserves to hear your gratitude properly." "Thank you, Grandpa," Mila repeated, this time louder but emptier. Something about her voice strained, too practiced, gnawed at me. From the corner, Lucas called out, "Dad, come meet some people from work." He guided me through the crowd, making introductions that felt oddly performative. "This is my father, Arthur Hale, the smartest man I know." His laugh sounded brittle, like glass ready to crack. One of his co-workers, a man named Matt, extended a hand politely. "Nice to meet you, sir. Lucas always talks about your bridge projects." "Does he?" I said, shaking the man's hand. "Funny, I didn't think he remembered much about those." Matt smiled awkwardly. "Well, he's proud of you." "Pride is a funny thing," I replied. "It sounds flattering until you realize what it's being used to sell." Matt chuckled uneasily and excused himself. Across the room, Brianna laughed too loudly with a group of guests, her eyes darting toward me every few seconds. Whenever someone mentioned family planning or future goals, She redirected the conversation to my health, or how hard it must be to live alone at that age. Every gesture, every word, felt curated. I made my way to the kitchen for a breath of quiet. On the counter sat 3 champagne flutes, 2 half full, 1 untouched. A pile of papers peeked out from beneath a floral tablecloth near Brianna's purse. I couldn't see much, just a logo that read, Marston Legal Services. Before I could lean closer, a small hand tugged at mine. "Grandpa," Mila whispered. Her eyes darted toward the hallway. "Can we talk?" "Of course, sweetheart." She led me away from the noise, her little shoes squeaking softly on the hardwood. The hallway walls were lined with framed photos, family portraits, vacations, milestones. But one picture caught my eye. Lena, holding a baby Mila, smiling in a way I hadn't seen since. The sight squeezed my heart. Mila stopped beneath that photo and turned to me. Her voice trembled. "Grandpa, I have to tell you something." I knelt down, lowering my voice to a whisper. "What is it, honey?" Her eyes filled with tears she was trying hard to hide. "Mom and Dad said they're going to take your money tonight." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I heard them talking in the kitchen last night. Mom said, he's old and lives alone. He won't even notice when the papers are signed. And Dad said he didn't want to, but Mom said the bank papers make it all legal." The hallway tilted beneath me. "Bank papers," I repeated softly. She nodded. "From the same place where Mom got the new card holder. She said something about a signature, about how you'd be too tired to understand." I forced my voice to stay calm. "Mila, you did the right thing telling me, but you mustn't say a word about this to anyone. All right?" Her chin wobbled. "Will you still love me if they get mad?" The question split me open. "Oh, Mila," I said, pulling her close. "There's nothing they or anyone could do to make me stop loving you. You're my girl. Always." She clung to me, trembling. I stroked her hair and whispered, "We'll fix this. But we have to act like everything's fine. Can you do that for me?" She nodded bravely. "Good girl," I said. "Now go open your presents. Smile for your friends. Grandpa will take care of everything." When we stepped back into the living room, I felt the weight of the secret pressing against my chest. Lucas looked over from across the room, smiling too widely, raising his glass. Brianna's eyes followed him, sharp and watchful. For the next hour, I played the part of the doting grandfather, laughing, eating, complimenting the decorations. But every time Brianna refilled my wineglass or brushed my sleeve, my stomach turned. Every movement she made felt like preparation for something calculated. At one point, I caught Lucas checking his watch again, then whispering something to her. She nodded once. The performance continued until the sun began to sink, painting amber light across the windows. As guests started to leave, I rose and said, "I should head home. My head's been aching all day." Brianna froze mid-sentence. "Oh, Arthur, stay a bit longer. We've planned something special for after the party." Lucas added quickly, "Yeah, Dad, remember that family talk I mentioned? It's really important." "I'm sure it can wait," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Family isn't going anywhere." Their expressions faltered. Brianna's nails tapped against her glass, a faint rhythm of panic. Lucas shifted uneasily, forcing a laugh. "Well," I said, glancing toward Mila, who was watching me quietly from across the room, "thank you for the wonderful party." I crouched down and hugged her tight. "Best day ever, right?" She whispered back, "Be careful, Grandpa." As I walked out the front door, the air outside felt cold against my skin despite the warm Wisconsin afternoon. I could feel their eyes following me through the window, their silhouettes framed against the gold light inside. I climbed into my truck, hands steady on the wheel, heart thundering in my chest. The road home stretched out empty and silent ahead of me. But inside my head, plans were already forming, quiet, deliberate, precise. I'd spent my life designing bridges that could bear any weight. Tonight, I was going to design one more. Only this time, it wouldn't carry anyone to safety. it would trap them exactly where they stood. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though the distance from Lucas's house to mine barely stretched 6 miles. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of pink and silver across Lake Mendota. The same water Lena and I used to walk beside every evening after dinner. That night, the reflection on the surface looked different, darker, restless, like it knew what was coming. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the air had turned cold and sharp. My porch light flickered once, as if hesitating, then stayed on. I paused at the door, Mila's trembling whisper still echoing in my ears. "They're going to take your money tonight." Inside, the house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The scent of old cedar and lemon polish clung to the air, familiar, grounding. I hung my jacket on the hook by the door and stood still for a moment, letting the weight of what I'd heard settle. Then I walked straight to my study. The room was the heart of everything I'd built, lined with books, framed blueprints, and pictures of bridges I'd helped design all over Wisconsin. Lena's photo sat on the shelf above my desk, smiling that quiet smile of hers that had always said, "Be smart, Arthur. Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment." I unlocked the bottom drawer and reached for the key taped underneath the frame. The wall safe behind the large framed blueprint of the Dane County overpass clicked open after a familiar turn sequence. 195706, Lena's birthday. Inside were folders, decades of tax records, property deeds, insurance statements, the paper trail of an entire life. I took everything to the desk and began my audit. The first folder held proof of how far I'd gone for Lucas. Tuition receipts for his master's program he'd never finished. Credit card statements from emergencies that somehow included vacations, down payments for their car, their house, their appliances. I'd told myself it was normal. Parents help their children, especially after losing their mother. But now, looking at each number, I saw what it really was: conditioning. They'd trained me to say yes, one request at a time. I opened a spreadsheet on my old laptop and began entering each transaction by date, amount, and reason. The list grew longer and longer until the total stared back at me. $82,470.56 over 3 years. My jaw clenched. And it wasn't just money. There were favors too. I had co-signed their car loan, guaranteed their mortgage, and let them use my name for a line of credit when Brianna's business needed a short-term boost. That business, her boutique candle brand, had closed within 6 months. I took out the next folder: investment portfolios and property statements. They had no idea how much I actually had. The bridge firm's profit sharing and the sale of my patents years ago had left me with more than $2 million in liquid assets, not including my home and the 2 rental houses I'd kept quiet about. Lucas thought I was comfortable. Brianna thought I was comfortable and naive. Neither knew I was wealthy enough to make or break them. As I worked, the minutes bled into hours. The ticking of the clock became the only sound, steady as a heartbeat. I pulled out the folder labeled Estate Planning Lena and Arthur Hale, 2018. Our last will, written when Lucas was still dependable, when I believed kindness could hold a family together. The will left everything to him, with the condition that he would ensure the education and welfare of Mila. I sat back, rubbing my temples. That line, innocent at the time, was the loophole they'd twist into a noose around my neck. A knock of the radiator made me flinch. For a moment, I half expected their car lights to appear in the driveway, that they'd arrive uninvited with their papers. But the street outside remained empty, blanketed by snowlight. I took a breath and opened a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote 3 words: Countermeasure plan. Begin. Step 1. Confirm what they had done at the bank. Step 2. Secure legal witnesses. Step 3. Rewrite my estate and transfer immediate control to a trust under my granddaughter's name. I took my phone and scrolled to my contacts. There were 3 people I could still trust: Daniel Brooks, regional manager at Northwind Community Bank, a man I'd once helped when his bridge construction loan almost fell through. Kendra Patel, an independent notary public, quiet and professional. She'd handled Lena's end-of-life paperwork and knew how to read a room. Ruth Ellison, the attorney who'd probated Lena's estate, and once told me, "If anyone ever pressures you about your signature, call me before you lift the pen." 3 allies, 3 safeguards. I drafted short messages to each. Need to review financial documents and possible misuse. Confidential. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at my house. Then I opened the small lockbox where I kept my flash drive backups. Years of business instincts had trained me never to keep one copy of anything. I plugged in the drive and began scanning the papers, bank statements, receipts, insurance letters, even text screenshots of Lucas asking for money. Evidence. Patterns. Proof. While the scanner hummed, I stared at Lena's photo again. "You were right," I said softly. I kept giving because I thought it would bring him closer. But I wasn't helping him grow, I was teaching him to take. The light on the scanner blinked green. I removed the flash drive, slipped it into the hidden compartment under the desk drawer, and locked it with a satisfying click. Outside, wind howled faintly against the window. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then fell silent. It was 2:47 a.m. when I finally leaned back. My desk was covered in open folders, a battlefield of paper and ink. I wrote a final note to myself before closing the notebook. Tomorrow, let them come. Make them believe you're confused. Then show them what clarity really looks like. The radiator hissed again, as if in approval. I shut off the lamp and stood by the window. Snow had begun to fall. Light, quiet, relentless. It coated the world in white, hiding the cracks underneath. But I saw them. I saw every single one. And by the time the sun rose over Madison, I'd already mapped the fault lines of betrayal and drawn the blueprint of their collapse. When dawn broke over Madison, the light filtering through my kitchen window was thin and cold, the kind that makes the world look cleaner than it really is. I stood there for a moment, holding my coffee mug with both hands, rehearsing the weakness I'd have to perform. Every movement would need to look slower, every blink, longer, every sentence, slightly disoriented. I'd spent a lifetime reading people now. It was time for me to let them read me wrong. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours, but my mind was sharp, clearer than it had been in months. Today, Lucas and Brianna would walk into my house, believing they'd outsmarted an aging man who couldn't tell one paper from another. What they didn't know was that I had built bridges that survived earthquakes. By 9 o'clock, I'd already set the stage. The coffee table was cleared, save for a small stack of unpaid utility bills I'd placed there on purpose, just to look scattered. I left a pair of reading glasses slightly crooked on the desk and an open envelope with a check half written, to Badger State Bank. The illusion of confusion was perfect. At 9:45 sharp, I got a text. "Brianna, we're on our way. Lucas is driving." Me, "I'll be home. Not feeling my best." Good. That last line would encourage pity and overconfidence. Before they arrived, I called Kendra, the notary. "If you can be here at 10, bring your journal and seal. Just say it's for routine verification." She agreed without hesitation. I'd worked with her long enough to know she didn't need the full story to act professionally. Next, I texted Daniel Brooks, my contact at Northwind Bank, morning. "Please bring copies of any documents signed or requested by Lucas Hale this week. Tell them it's for review. Arrive around 10:05. He replied in under a minute, "Understood. I'll be there personally." When I looked in the mirror before they arrived, I barely recognized the man staring back. My hair was mussed, my shirt wrinkled. I'd even left a bit of coffee on my sleeve for effect. I practiced slumping my shoulders slightly and frowning as if I were trying to remember something just out of reach. By the time the doorbell rang, I was ready. Lucas's voice came first. "Dad? It's us." I shuffled to the door, forcing a faint limp. and opened it with a weak smile. Lucas. Brianna. Come in, come in. I didn't expect you so soon. Brianna's eyes flicked across the room like a hawk scanning a field. We wanted to check on you. You sounded confused yesterday. Confused? I tilted my head slightly, like a man who isn't sure he's heard correctly. I don't remember saying that. She gave a sympathetic laugh. That's exactly why we're here. Lucas carried a sleek brown leather portfolio under his arm, the kind lawyers use when they already think they've won. He set it gently on the coffee table, right where I wanted him to. Dad, he began, sitting down across from me. We've been worried. You've been forgetting things lately. Bills, dates. It's not safe for you to handle all this alone anymore. I nodded slowly, tracing a finger over the rim of my coffee cup. You're right. Everything's been fuzzy lately. Brianna reached into the portfolio and pulled out a neat stack of papers, each tabbed with bright blue stickers that read, "Sign here." These are just forms to make things easier, she said smoothly. They'll let us manage your bills, medical appointments, and bank accounts. You won't have to worry about a thing. I leaned closer, squinting at the print. Power of attorney, financial, healthcare proxy, I murmured, pretending to struggle with the words. Exactly, she said brightly. You're such a responsible man, Arthur. We just want to help. My fingers trembled deliberately this time as I picked up the first page. The print was small, but I could see enough to recognize what it was. If I signed, they'd have complete legal control over my home, my income, even my medical consent. How thoughtful, I said softly, setting the pen down. But it all feels so official. Shouldn't these things be notarized? Brianna's expression didn't flicker, but her pulse jumped in her neck. Well, yes, but that's just a formality. We can do that later. Ah, I said, rubbing my temple. I think I have a notary coming by soon, actually. A friend who helps me with taxes. Lucas hesitated. Dad, that's not necessary. These are simple documents. We just need you to sign now so we can get things moving. I sighed, looking down at my shaking hands. Maybe I should lie down first. These headaches have been terrible lately. Brianna leaned forward, her voice soft but urgent. Arthur, please, this is for your own good. I looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time since they'd arrived. My own good, I repeated. Like the last time when you suggested I sell this house because it was too much space for me? She blinked, thrown off by the sudden clarity in my tone. That's not what I meant. Of course it isn't, I said gently, sinking back into the couch as if the energy had drained out of me. You're only trying to help. Lucas shifted uneasily. Dad, maybe we should come back tomorrow. You don't seem well. Brianna shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. No, he's fine. We should finish this now, while he's calm. Tomorrow? I interrupted softly, with the firm patience of an engineer stopping a reckless worker from cutting the wrong wire. Let's do it properly tomorrow. I'll feel clearer by then. And that notary, she can make it all official. Her jaw clenched, the mask slipping for just a moment. Arthur, we really don't need witnesses for family business. Don't we? I asked, still sounding mild, almost apologetic. You're right, dear. I'm just old-fashioned that way. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe Dad's right, he muttered. We can do it tomorrow morning. Brianna stood, closing the folder with a sharp snap. Fine. Tomorrow. Her tone was tight but controlled. Good, I said softly. 10 o'clock should work. I walked them to the door, still playing the tired old man. You two are good to me, I said. I don't know what I'd do without you. Don't worry, Brianna said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You won't have to. As their car pulled out of the driveway, I dropped the act. My back straightened, my eyes sharpened. I picked up the phone and called Kendra. It's confirmed, I said. Tomorrow at 10. Bring your seal and your notebook. Then I called Daniel. You'll want to be here too. It's about those bank inquiries I mentioned. He hesitated. Arthur, is this about? It's about making sure certain people learn what it feels like to face a signed truth. When I hung up, I looked around my quiet house. The air felt heavy with anticipation. They thought I was losing my mind. Tomorrow, they'd find out just how sharp it really was. And when the clock struck 10, the signatures they wanted so badly wouldn't free them. They'd convict them. The morning of the ambush dawned colder than usual, with frost clinging to the edges of my porch railing and the pale light of winter leaking through the blinds. I'd been up since 5, pacing my study, going over every detail one last time. Today was the day my son would discover just how well his father still played the game he thought he'd mastered. By 9:30, the pieces were already in motion. Kendra Patel, punctual as ever, arrived first. Her brown coat was dusted with snowflakes, her notary seal and ledger tucked neatly under her arm. "Morning, Mr. Hale," she greeted, smiling warmly. "Morning, Kendra. Thank you for coming on such short notice." "No problem at all. You said family paperwork?" "That's right," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Let's call it a clarification of intentions." She chuckled softly as she unpacked her materials onto the table. "Understood. I'll make sure every signature gets the attention it deserves." At 9:55, the sound of tires crunching over gravel signaled Daniel Brooks's arrival. I watched from the front window as he stepped out of his SUV mid-50s. Gray suit, calm expression, briefcase in hand, a man who'd spent his life weighing financial truths for a living. "Arthur," he said as I opened the door, his breath visible in the cold air. "You said this might get sensitive?" "Yes," I said simply, "and I'm glad you came. You may recognize a few names today." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. Good man. By 9:59, everything was set. My desk was cleared except for 3 piles. The documents Lucas and Brianna had brought. My records of every payment, transfer, and receipt. A freshly printed addendum to my will, signed and dated, locked under the desk drawer for later. The clock struck 10. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. I let a few seconds pass before answering, the kind of silence that makes guilt louder than words. When I opened the door, Lucas stood there in his navy coat, pale but smiling nervously. Brianna was behind him, clutching her leather portfolio like a shield. "Dad," Lucas began, forcing cheerfulness, "we brought the forms again, like we talked about." "Wonderful," I said softly. "Come in. We have guests." Their eyes flicked to the 2 people seated at my table. Daniel, composed and professional, and Kendra, pen poised above her open journal. Brianna's smile faltered. "Oh, you didn't tell us." "I thought transparency would make things easier," I interrupted calmly. "You said yesterday this was family business, and I agree. But I believe important family business deserves witnesses." Lucas looked confused, his eyes darting between us. "Dad, we didn't mean." "Please," I said, gesturing toward the couch. "Sit." They obeyed, hesitantly. Brianna placed her portfolio on the table, snapping it open. "We just want to make sure you're protected, Arthur," she said with that same syrupy tone she used when she wanted something. "You've been so forgetful lately." Kendra glanced up from her notes. "Mr. Hale, do you confirm that you requested this signing voluntarily?" "Oh, absolutely," I said, folding my hands. "Though, I must admit, I'm curious about some of the details first." I turned to Daniel. "You remember my son, Lucas Hale, and his wife Brianna?" Daniel's eyes sharpened just slightly. "Yes. We met Tuesday morning at Northwind Bank." Brianna blinked. "That's right. We were researching," Daniel finished evenly. "Conservatorship procedures, power of attorney transitions, expedited asset control requests. My staff mentioned you were quite thorough." Lucas froze. "That's not what it sounds like." Daniel continued calmly, opening his briefcase. "You specifically asked about filing for emergency conservatorship under mental incompetence clauses. You even requested the required medical affidavit forms." Kendra's pen stilled midline. Brianna's face drained of color. "We were just asking questions," she said quickly. "You know, to be prepared." "For what?" I asked, my voice still calm. "For the moment you decided I was too old to handle my own life?" "Dad," Lucas whispered. "We thought—" "No," I said sharply, my tone cutting through the room. "You didn't think. You followed her lead and assumed I'd sign whatever you placed in front of me." Brianna stood abruptly, her voice rising. "Arthur, you're misunderstanding everything. We love you. We just want to protect your assets from scammers, from taxes, from myself?" I asked quietly. The silence that followed was heavy. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Daniel," I said, "can you read the header, please?" He adjusted his glasses. "Northwind Community Bank Summary of Client Inquiry, dated Tuesday, February 14th. Subject: Emergency Conservatorship Procedures. Inquirer: Brianna Hale." Lucas sank back into the chair, his face gray. Brianna's lips parted, but no words came out. "Dad," Lucas murmured, "I swear, I didn't know she—" "Oh, you knew," I said. "You've known for years how she uses your weakness to feed her greed. But you always let her, because it was easier than standing up to her." Kendra spoke gently. "Mr. Hale, would you like me to proceed with notarization?" "Yes," I said, "but not for their documents. For mine." I reached for the folder labeled Evidence. Inside were detailed records of every payment I'd made to them, neatly itemized. I slid it across the table toward Daniel. "This," I said, "is a ledger of every act of generosity I've extended since Lena's funeral. $82,470.56. Each transaction documented, dated, and witnessed through bank transfers and receipts." Daniel nodded approvingly. "Very thorough, Arthur." Brianna's mask finally cracked. "You can't just weaponize family support." "Family support?" I repeated, standing now. "Is that what you call 3 years of manipulation? Of using my grief as a bank account? You didn't come here to help me, you came here to erase me." Lucas's voice broke. "We thought you needed guidance." "You thought wrong," I said. The room went still. The only sound was the slow tick of the clock on the wall. Then I turned to Kendra. "Please record this conversation as an official statement attached to my new documents." She nodded, beginning to write. "Effective immediately," I said. "Any existing or proposed power of attorney granting Lucas or Brianna Hale authority over my assets, property, or medical decisions is revoked. Furthermore, I'm instructing that my estate be placed into a new trust managed independently." Lucas looked up, bewildered. "A trust?" "Yes," I said quietly. "For Mila." Brianna's voice shook. "You can't do that. She's 8. And she's the only one in this family who still knows the meaning of truth." I turned to Daniel. "He'll serve as witness to the execution of the trust later today. I'll have Attorney Ellison finalize the paperwork this afternoon." He nodded. "Understood." Brianna took a step toward me, face tight with desperation. "Arthur, think about what you're doing. You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said. "You did that the moment you planned to have me declared incompetent." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Kendra stamped the page in front of her, the sound of metal on paper breaking the silence like a verdict. When Lucas and Brianna finally left, they didn't slam the door, they just walked out quietly, as if the house itself had judged them. I stood at the window, watching their car pull away, the snow swirling around the tires. I should have felt victorious. Instead, all I felt was tired. Betrayal doesn't end with a confession. It echoes. It seeps into the corners of a house, into memories you once called home. But as the clock struck 11, I made myself a promise. If they wanted to play legal games, I'd show them how a man who built bridges for a living plays chess. And this time, the only thing collapsing would be their lies. By the time the front door closed behind them, the silence in my house felt heavier than any storm. I stood for a long moment in the middle of the study, staring at the papers they'd left behind. The portfolio lay open on the table, its blue signature tabs fluttering slightly in the draft from the window. That was how greed looked when it finally ran out of excuses, paper, ink, and fear. I turned to Daniel, who was still seated with his briefcase on his lap. "You can see now why I asked you to come." He nodded slowly. "You did the right thing, Arthur. They were preparing to move fast. If you hadn't caught this in time, they could have filed for temporary conservatorship within 72 hours. 72 hours, I repeated, the number tasting bitter in my mouth. That's all it would have taken to erase 40 years of work. Kendra closed her notary journal carefully. I've seen ugly family disputes, but this was planned like a corporate takeover. Because that's exactly what it was, I said. And they would have pulled it off if it weren't for Mila. I walked to the bookshelf and opened the top drawer of the small cabinet. Inside sat an old tablet cracked at one corner, the screen faintly smudged with fingerprints. Mila had borrowed it the week before to play drawing games. What she didn't realize was that the voice assistant feature on the device was still active and synced to my cloud storage. When I'd gotten home last night, I plugged it into my computer to clear some space. That's when I found the recording. "Listen to this," I said, tapping play. Brianna's voice filled the room, crisp and unmistakable. "He won't even know what he's signing. The bank said once the forms are notarized, it's airtight." Then Lucas, quieter, hesitant. "I don't like this, Bree. He's my dad." "And he's alone," she snapped. "Do you want to keep living like this? Once he's in assisted care, we can rent this place and clear our debts." The recording ended with the sound of a clinking glass, and Brianna's final words, "By Monday, everything will be ours." When it finished, no one spoke for several seconds. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Daniel leaned forward, his banker's composure slipping. "Arthur, this is irrefutable. With that recording, their intent is clear." Kendra exhaled slowly. "That's criminal coercion, if not outright fraud." I nodded. "I sent a copy to Attorney Ellison last night. She's reviewing it now. The metadata matches the date of their visit to your bank." Daniel rubbed his chin, visibly shaken. "They asked my staff specific questions about freezing accounts too. Said something about preventing misuse. They played it like they were concerned about elder safety." "Elder safety," I repeated quietly. "They learned the language of protection just to weaponize it." Kendra began packing her bag, her movements careful. "I'll notarize a statement of what I witnessed today. It'll help if this ever goes to court." I nodded gratefully. "Thank you, both of you." Before Daniel left, he said something that lingered. "You built bridges for a living, Arthur, but you just burned one that needed burning." When they were gone, I stood by the window again, watching the snow fall over the lake. My reflection in the glass looked older but steadier. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a man clinging to memories. I felt like a man reclaiming his footing. Still, I knew this wasn't over. People like Brianna didn't fold after one loss, they regrouped. So I opened the locked drawer beneath the desk and pulled out a thick envelope stamped with the state seal of Wisconsin. Inside was the document that Lena and I had quietly created 5 years earlier, the Hale Land Trust. It wasn't just a clause in my will, it was an active, independent trust, already holding ownership of my properties. Lena had insisted on it after her cancer diagnosis, worried that one day our son might make poor decisions under someone else's influence. At the time, I'd thought she was being overly cautious. Now, I saw it for what it was, a final act of foresight. I spread the papers across the desk. The trust's terms were clear. All real estate owned by Arthur and Lena Hale was deeded to a private entity managed by a neutral trustee. The income from the properties flowed directly into a fund for educational or charitable use designated by the trustees. And buried deep in the fine print was the clause Lena had insisted on. In the event of undue influence or attempted exploitation of the grantor, beneficiaries found complicit shall be permanently disinherited. That clause was my shield and their downfall. I took out my pen and added a handwritten note at the bottom of the file. Effective immediately. Redirect all trust income to the newly formed Mila Education Fund. Oversight to remain external. Then I signed and dated it. The irony was beautiful. They had planned to steal everything by tricking me into signing away my rights. Instead, I'd just signed the final lock on a vault they'd never open. At exactly 2 p.m., my phone rang. Ruth Ellison's calm voice came through the speaker. "Arthur, I've reviewed everything. The recording, the bank testimony, and Kendra's notes. It's airtight. I've also confirmed that the trust you and Lena established is still fully active under Wisconsin law. They can't touch it." "Good," I said quietly. Then it's time they understood what legal paperwork really looks like. Ruth chuckled softly. "I take it you have a plan?" "Oh, I do," I replied. "And it's one they won't see coming." That evening, I drafted 2 letters, one to Lucas, one to Brianna. Both were calm, almost gentle in tone. I thanked them for visiting. I told them I understood their concerns about my health, and that I had taken steps to ensure the family's future. I invited them to meet again in 2 days for a final discussion about estate planning. Then, in smaller print near the bottom, I added, "All parties will be joined by my legal representative and a recording officer." They would assume I was offering them one last chance to sign the documents their way. In reality, I was giving them a chance to sign their own ruin. Before bed, I opened the old tablet once more. Mila's drawings were still saved in the gallery, colorful shapes, stick figures, smiling suns. And in the corner of one, scrawled in her uneven handwriting, she had written, "Best day ever with Grandpa." I smiled, a lump rising in my throat. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I whispered. "Grandpa's building one last bridge for you." Outside, the snow fell harder, blanketing Madison in quiet white. And somewhere out there, 2 people were celebrating too early, thinking the storm had passed. But they had no idea that the ground beneath them was already giving way. 2 mornings later, the winter light broke through thin clouds over Madison, painting the lake in pale gold. My house smelled faintly of coffee and cold air. I'd slept better than I had in weeks. There's a peace that comes when you've already accepted what you must do. At 9:58, the sound of tires crunching against ice drifted through the front window. Lucas's car, right on time. When they stepped inside, I noticed everything. Lucas's eyes red-rimmed, the way his fingers fidgeted with his wedding ring. Brianna, dressed in a tailored coat, chin high but pale, as if she hadn't slept either. "Dad," Lucas started, voice cautious, "you wanted to see us?" "Yes," I said. "I thought we should close this chapter properly." We moved into the study, where a small stack of papers sat neatly on my desk. The morning light caught the embossed seal of the Hale Education Trust at the top of each document. "I finalized the trust yesterday," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Mila will be provided for fully. College, graduate school, or whatever dream she chooses to chase. She'll have every opportunity her parents squandered." Brianna's lips tightened. "Arthur, this isn't fair. We were just trying to protect." "Protect me?" I interrupted quietly. "By planning to have me declared incompetent? By visiting a bank to learn how to lock me in a care facility?" She froze, color draining from her face. I continued, "I could take this recording and press charges. What you attempted was financial coercion and fraud, but I won't." Lucas looked up, startled. You won't?" "No," I folded my hands. "Because Mila deserves parents who aren't in prison." Brianna's eyes flickered with relief too quickly. "But," I added, "there are conditions." I slid a thin envelope toward them. "This outlines a 1-year probation period. You will each sign a renunciation of all claims to my estate. You will attend financial counseling. You will maintain full-time employment without requesting further assistance from me. If you complete these terms, the trust will grant you limited access to a family support fund strictly for Mila's needs." Lucas blinked at the papers, reading in silence. Brianna's jaw clenched. "And if we refuse? Then you'll live exactly as you've lived without my help." Her voice rose. "We can't live like that. You cut us off from everything, our house, our car. I met her gaze. Then find out what the rest of the world does when they run out of other people's money. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. Lucas finally exhaled and whispered, "Dad, I'm sorry." His voice cracked, the words spilling out unpolished, raw. "I was stupid. I thought Brianna was right, that you were slipping, that we could handle things better than you. But when I heard that recording, I realized what I'd almost done." He glanced toward Brianna, then back at me. "If you'll give me a chance, I'll make this right." I studied him, the same boy who once built model bridges beside me at the kitchen table. The boy who'd grown into a man who'd lost his way somewhere between fear and greed. "Then start today," I said softly. "Get a job that doesn't rely on my name. Be the father Mila can trust to tell the truth." Brianna's face hardened, pride fighting her desperation. "You can't just erase us from your will." "I already have," I replied evenly. "But I left the door open barely. If you change, the trust can reconsider. Not before." Her voice trembled. "You'll regret this." "No," I said quietly. "You will." I signed the final page before them, the pen gliding across the line with a quiet certainty. Kendra's seal shimmered faintly at the bottom, already dry from yesterday's visit. "This is done," I said. "You may go." Lucas hesitated at the doorway. "Dad, thank you for not destroying us." I looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not saving you, Lucas. I'm saving what little good might still be left in you." When the door closed behind them, I turned toward the window. Across the lake, the ice had begun to thaw in thin silver cracks. Sometimes mercy isn't softness, it's structure. It's giving people just enough rope to climb, or to see how close they came to hanging themselves. And as the winter wind moved over the frozen water, I whispered to Lena, "They'll learn love, or they'll lose everything. But either way, Mila will be safe." A month later, the ice on Lake Mendota had begun to melt. The snow that once blanketed Madison now slid quietly into the water, carrying winter's remnants away. My house smelled faintly of coffee and pine polish, again order restored, peace returning like sunlight through a half-opened curtain. Lucas called twice during those weeks, each time speaking more like the son I remembered, careful, humble, sober. He'd taken a job at a local warehouse managing logistics. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. He said it felt good to earn something that no one could take away. Brianna, on the other hand, kept her distance. I later learned from an old friend that she'd started part-time shifts at a nearby clinic while attending mandatory counseling. For the first time, she was working for more than appearances. Mila visited me every weekend. Her laughter filled the house like fresh air. She didn't talk about that night at the party, and I never asked. Some truths don't need to be revisited. It's enough to know they were survived. One Saturday afternoon, we sat together at the park near Tenny Lagoon. She was building a snow fort even though half the snow had turned to slush. "Grandpa," she said, brushing hair from her eyes, "Mom and Dad said they're trying to be better." I smiled. "I believe they are." She nodded, then frowned in concentration as she shaped another snowblock. "Are you still mad at them?" I paused. The truth settled slowly, like dust in sunlight. "No, sweetheart. Anger builds walls. I'd rather build bridges." "Like the ones you used to make?" she asked. "Exactly like that," I said, ruffling her hair. "But some bridges take longer to rebuild." That evening, I returned home and stood in my study. The new trust documents rested inside the safe, their seals gleaming beneath the lamp. Outside, the lake reflected streaks of gold from the setting Sunday. I thought of Lena, her steady wisdom, her unshakable belief that decency can survive even the worst disappointments. She had been right again. I'd kept my promise to her, to protect Mila, to watch Lucas carefully, and to hold the family together not through money, but through truth. As the last light faded over Madison, I closed my eyes and whispered the lesson that had carried me through everything. Love without respect is just possession, and protection without honesty is control. The only family worth keeping is the one that can face the truth and still choose love. Then I poured 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for Lena, and sat quietly by the window, watching the bridge lights flicker on across the water. For the first time in years, I felt whole.